I'm Angie, 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was the youngest senior attorney at Preston and Mitchell Law. After 12 amazing weeks with my newborn daughter, Emma, I couldn't wait to get back to my corner office with its stunning view of downtown. Instead, I found an empty conference room where my office used to be, my nameplate in the trash and my files missing. They thought maternity leave was their chance to push me out. But I returned with something they never expected. Before I tell you how I turned this nightmare around, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever dealt with workplace sabotage. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Growing up in a small town in Missouri with a single mother who worked 2 jobs to support us, I learned the value of hard work early. I was the first in my family to attend college, working nights at a local diner to pay for textbooks. Law school was my dream, but seemed impossible until I earned a partial scholarship to State University. Even then, I graduated with substantial student loans that I was determined to pay off quickly. When I joined Preston and Mitchell Law as a junior associate 8 years ago, I was driven to prove myself. The firm specialized in corporate law and had a reputation for being both prestigious and demanding. I didn't mind the 70-hour work weeks or the competitive atmosphere. While other associates complained about the grueling schedule, I saw each case as an opportunity to demonstrate my capabilities. Richard Bennett, the head of my department, became my mentor early on. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and a commanding presence, Richard had a reputation for being tough but fair. He seemed impressed by my work ethic and attention to detail. "Angie, you have the sharpest mind of any junior associate I've seen in years," he once told me. After I found a critical loophole in a competitor's contract, that comment kept me going through many late nights at the office. By my 5th year, I had earned a reputation for handling complex corporate mergers with exceptional skill. Clients specifically requested me, and I was promoted faster than most of my peers. When I finally earned my corner office on the 20th floor with views of the city skyline, it felt like the culmination of everything I'd worked for. I decorated it with a few meaningful items: my law school diploma, a photo of my mother and me at graduation, and a small jade plant that symbolized growth and prosperity. My colleagues were a mixed group. Jessica Kim, another senior attorney who specialized in intellectual property law, became my closest friend at the firm. We often grabbed lunch together and supported each other through tough cases. Mark Daniels and Trevor Washington were fellow senior attorneys who were generally supportive, though Trevor occasionally made subtle comments that suggested he didn't believe women belonged in corporate law. Everything was going according to plan until I met Daniel, an architect I consulted regarding some real estate litigation. Our professional relationship quickly evolved into something more, and 2 years later, we were married. When I discovered I was pregnant about a year after our wedding, I experienced a mix of joy and apprehension about how it would affect my career trajectory. I waited until I was 14 weeks along to share the news at work. Richard congratulated me with what seemed like genuine warmth. "We'll make it work, Angie. Your position here is secure," he assured me. The partners hosted a small celebration with cupcakes in the conference room, and everyone offered congratulations. Around the same time, the firm hired Bradley Thompson, a 30-year-old attorney from a competitor firm in New York. Bradley was immediately assigned to my department. With his designer suits and Harvard law degree, he made no secret of his ambition. "I plan to make partner in 3 years flat," he announced during his welcome lunch. I noticed how Richard seemed impressed by Bradley's confidence and pedigree. As my pregnancy progressed, I worked diligently to prepare for my temporary absence. I created detailed files on each client, wrote comprehensive transition memos, and trained Jessica to handle my most complex cases. I met with each client personally to assure them they would be well taken care of during my 12-week leave. The day before my maternity leave began, Richard called me into his office. "Everything's in order, Angie. Don't worry about anything here. Focus on your baby and yourself," he said with a smile. "Your office and clients will be waiting when you return." I remember walking out of the building that evening, rubbing my large belly and feeling a mix of emotions. I was excited to meet my daughter, but also proud of how thoroughly I had prepared for this temporary departure. I had absolutely no idea that this would be the last time I would see my office as I knew it. Emma Grace arrived after 22 hours of labor, a beautiful 7-pound, 8-ounce bundle with my nose and her father's dark, curly hair. The first weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, feeding schedules, and an overwhelming love I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. Daniel took 2 weeks off to help us settle in, and my mother came to stay for another 2 weeks after that. Despite the exhaustion and adjustment to new motherhood, I was determined to stay connected to the office. When Emma was 3 weeks old, I started checking my work email during her longer naps. I sent congratulatory notes when I heard the firm had landed a new major client and asked occasional questions about my ongoing cases. Richard's responses were prompt and positive at first. "Everything's under control here, Angie. Bradley has been helping with some of your clients temporarily, but they're all asking about you. Focus on that beautiful baby," his email read. By week 6, I noticed a change. My emails were answered with increasing delay, and the responses became shorter and more vague. When I asked specific questions about the Johnson merger, a major deal I had been working on for months before my leave, Richard simply responded, "Bradley's handling it now. Don't worry." During my 8th week of leave, I was accidentally copied on an email thread with the subject line "Office Reorganization." I probably shouldn't have opened it, but curiosity got the better of me. The conversation was between Richard Martha from HR and Stanley Preston, one of the founding partners. They discussed maximizing office efficiency and redistributing resources according to current priorities. My name wasn't specifically mentioned, but there was talk of converting underutilized spaces to better serve the firm's evolving needs. A flicker of unease passed through me, but I dismissed it. Surely they wouldn't make major changes affecting me without discussion. I decided to call Jessica for some insight. "How are things really going there?" I asked, after exchanging pleasantries and baby updates. There was a pause before Jessica responded. "Busy as always. Your clients miss you." Another pause. "Bradley has been working closely with Richard lately. They seem to get along well." Something in her tone made me press further. "Is there something you're not telling me, Jess?" No, she said too quickly. "It's just the usual office politics. Nothing for you to worry about right now. How's Emma sleeping?" The subject change was obvious, but I let it drop. Perhaps I was being paranoid. After all, what could possibly happen in 12 weeks? As my return date approached, I began preparing in earnest. I researched childcare options extensively before selecting a highly recommended facility close to my office. I read industry updates and legal journals to ensure I wouldn't return out of touch. I even started wearing my pre-pregnancy clothes around the house, trying to feel like my professional self again. The night before my return, I laid out my outfit, a navy blue suit that my mother had helped me select during a rare shopping trip without Emma. I polished my best shoes and packed my breast pump and supplies in a discreet bag. I checked my briefcase, making sure I had a fresh legal pad and my favorite pens. After feeding Emma and rocking her to sleep, I kissed her forehead gently. "Mommy's going back to work tomorrow, sweet girl," I whispered. "But I'll always come back to you." I barely slept that night, my mind racing with thoughts of reuniting with colleagues, catching up on cases, and proving that motherhood hadn't diminished my professional capabilities. I was nervous, but excited, confident that I had prepared for a smooth transition back to my career. If only I had known what awaited me at Preston and Mitchell the next morning. Monday morning arrived with the familiar beep of my alarm at 5:30. After nursing Emma and savoring a few quiet moments with her, I handed her to Daniel for their morning bonding time while I got ready. I chose my power suit, carefully applied makeup for the first time in weeks, and slid on the pearl earrings my mother had given me for law school graduation. Looking in the mirror, I saw the professional Angie returning, ready to prove that motherhood and career success weren't mutually exclusive. The commute downtown felt familiar yet strange after 3 months away. When I entered the building lobby, the security guard greeted me warmly. "Welcome back, Miss Clark. How's the little one?" "She's wonderful, Sam. Growing too fast already, I replied, feeling a momentary pang at being separated from Emma. As I waited for the elevator, I pulled out my phone to check the photo Daniel had just sent of Emma smiling in her crib. The doors opened and I stepped inside, along with several other employees from various floors. A few faces I recognized, and they offered polite smiles, but I noticed some exchanged glances as I pressed the button for the 20th floor. One woman from accounting quickly averted her eyes when I caught her staring. When the elevator doors opened at my floor, I stepped out, expecting to see the familiar layout of our reception area. Instead, I was greeted by completely rearranged furniture, new paint on the walls, and a modern reception desk where Kathy, a new receptionist I didn't recognize, Saturday. "Good morning," I said, trying to mask my confusion. "I'm Angie Clark, returning from maternity leave." "Oh yes," Kathy replied, her eyes widening slightly. "Welcome back. Let me call Martha from HR to help you get settled." While waiting, I glanced around, trying to orient myself. The hallway leading to my corner office looked different, with new artwork and rearranged seating areas. When I started walking in that direction, Kathy called out, "Miss Clark, if you could just wait a moment, please." I ignored her and continued down the hallway, my heart beginning to race as I approached where my office should be. Instead of my door with its nameplate reading Angela Clark, Senior Attorney, I found myself staring at a glass wall and a plaque reading Conference Room C. Inside, a large table with 12 chairs had replaced my desk, bookshelves, and personal items. My breath caught in my throat. This had to be some mistake. I quickly moved further down the hall, thinking perhaps my office had been relocated. That's when I spotted it near a recycling bin in an alcove, my nameplate discarded like trash among paper coffee cups and crumpled memos. With shaking hands, I picked it up, running my fingers over the engraved letters of my name. The reality of what was happening began to sink in. Just as Martha from HR approached, her face a carefully composed mask of corporate pleasantness. "Angie, welcome back," she said, her voice overly cheerful. "We're so glad to have you return. If you'll come with me, I'll show you to your new workspace." "My new workspace," I repeated, still clutching my discarded nameplate. "What happened to my office? Where are my things?" Martha's smile tightened. "We've undergone some restructuring during your absence to better utilize our space. The firm is expanding, and we needed additional conference rooms for client meetings." She led me through the maze of hallways to the opposite side of the building, away from the windows and prime offices, to a small interior area filled with cubicles. Administrative assistants and paralegals glanced up as we passed quickly, returning to their screens when they saw my expression. "Here we are," Martha announced, gesturing to a cubicle wedged between the copy room and a busy hallway. The space was about 1/3 the size of my former office, with a basic desk, computer, and chair. No window, no privacy, no dignity. "This is a joke, right?" I said, my voice barely audible over the constant noise from the copy machine and foot traffic. "I understand this is an adjustment," Martha replied mechanically. "Your personal items have been packed and stored in the file room on the 18th floor. You can retrieve them at your convenience." "And my clients? My cases?" I asked, still standing at the entrance of the cubicle, unable to bring myself to step inside and make this humiliation real. "Richard can brief you on your new assignments this afternoon. He has a meeting now, but has time at 2 o'clock, Martha replied. "In the meantime, you can get settled and reacquaint yourself with our systems. Your login should still work." She handed me a folder labeled "Returning Employee Information" and walked away, leaving me standing there as curious eyes peered over cubicle walls. The whispers started immediately, not quite quiet enough that I couldn't hear. "That's the one who was on maternity leave. I heard they gave all her big clients to Bradley. Wonder if she'll quit now." Numb with shock, I made my way to the 18th floor file room. There, in the back corner, I found 3 cardboard boxes haphazardly filled with my belongings. My law school diploma had a cracked frame. My mother's photo lay at the bottom of a box beneath heavy reference books. My jade plant was nowhere to be found. As I sifted through the boxes trying to make sense of this nightmare, the full reality of my situation hit me. They had used my maternity leave to systematically erase my presence and diminish my position. They had taken everything I'd worked for and expected me to accept it without question. I sat down on a stack of boxes, still holding my broken diploma frame, and felt a wave of emotions wash over me. Shock, humiliation, anger, and beneath it all, a deep sense of betrayal. In that moment, I realized that becoming a mother had made me a target, and Preston and Mitchell was betting that new motherhood had weakened me enough that I would simply accept this treatment. They had no idea how wrong they were. At precisely 2 o'clock, I knocked on Richard's office door. Through the glass, I could see him speaking with Bradley Thompson. They were laughing, sharing some joke that abruptly died when Richard spotted me. He quickly composed his face into a neutral expression and waved me in. "Angie, welcome back," Richard said without standing. "You remember Bradley, of course." Bradley gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good to have you back, Angie. You look well." His emphasis on the word well carried a subtle implication that looking professional after having a baby was somehow surprising. "I'll leave you two to catch up," Bradley said, rising from his chair. I noticed his custom suit, his confident posture, and the way Richard nodded approvingly at him. As he passed me, he added, "If you have any questions about the Johnson merger, feel free to ask. It's practically wrapped up now." The Johnson merger. My biggest case. The one I had spent months laying groundwork for before my leave. Once Bradley left, closing the door behind him, I sat in the chair across from Richard, the same chair where I'd received promotions and praise over the years. "What's going on, Richard?" I asked directly. "I come back from maternity leave to find my office turned into a conference room. My personal belongings packed away like I was fired, and my major clients reassigned. Was any of this going to be discussed with me?" Richard leaned back in his chair, a look of mild surprise on his face. "Angie, I understand you're feeling a bit disoriented after your time away. Change can be difficult, but the firm has been evolving, and we needed to make adjustments for maximum efficiency." "Adjustments?" I repeated. "Removing me from my office and putting me in a cubicle by the copy machine is an adjustment." Richard sighed. "Your absence gave us an opportunity to reassess our space utilization. The partners decided we needed that corner for client meetings more than we needed it for a single attorney's office." Before I could respond, there was another knock at the door, and Martha from HR entered without waiting for an answer. This had been planned, I realized. A coordinated effort. "I thought I'd join you," Martha said, pleasantly taking the seat next to me. "Coming back after leave can be such a transition, and I want to make sure we're supporting you properly." Richard nodded gratefully at Martha's intrusion. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing the changes that have taken place." "Angie," Martha said, turning to me with practiced concern, "we value your contributions to Preston and Mitchell tremendously. These organizational changes aren't a reflection on your work. We're simply adapting to business needs." "What about my clients?" I asked. "The Johnson merger was months of my work, and now Bradley has taken it over." "Bradley stepped in when needed during your absence," Richard explained smoothly. "The clients responded well to him, and continuity is important in these relationships. It wouldn't serve them to switch representatives again, now that they've developed a rapport with Bradley. So I've been demoted," I stated flatly. Martha flinched at the word. "Not at all. Your role has been reimagined to better serve the firm's current structure. You'll be handling smaller corporate clients and supporting senior attorneys on larger cases until you're fully reintegrated." Reintegrated? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was gone for 12 weeks, not 12 years. My skills haven't diminished. Richard cleared his throat. "Of course not, but priorities can shift when one becomes a parent. Many new mothers find they prefer a less demanding schedule." "I never said I wanted a less demanding schedule," I pointed out. "Well," Martha interjected with a patronizing smile, "you haven't experienced the reality of balancing motherhood and full-time work yet. This transition period will give you space to find that balance, without the pressure of major cases immediately upon your return." I looked from Richard to Martha, suddenly seeing clearly what was happening. This isn't about space utilization or my capabilities. This is about my maternity leave. You're punishing me for having a baby. That's completely unfair, Richard replied, his tone hardening. The firm generously provided your full 12 weeks of leave with pay. Many companies aren't so accommodating. You should be grateful your position was held at all. Held, I laughed incredulously. My position wasn't held. It was completely altered without my knowledge or consent. Martha leaned forward, her voice taking on an edge despite her smile. Angie, I understand this is emotional for you. Many new mothers experience sensitivity and mood fluctuations due to hormonal changes. Perhaps you should take some time to adjust before jumping to conclusions. The blatant sexism of her statement left me momentarily speechless. They were using my status as a new mother to gaslight me into accepting unacceptable treatment. We have several working mothers here who found excellent work-life balance, Martha continued. Janet in tax law reduced to part-time hours after her second child. Perhaps that's something to consider if you're finding the transition challenging. The implication was clear: accept the demotion quietly or leave. They were betting that as a new mother, I would be too exhausted, too emotional, or too distracted to fight back. Is there anything else? I asked, coolly gathering my composure. I should get back to my cubicle and start catching up on my reduced workload. Richard seemed relieved by my apparent acceptance. That's the spirit, Angie. Give it time. Things have a way of sorting themselves out. As I left Richard's office, I spotted Jessica down the hall. She quickly averted her eyes and disappeared around a corner, avoiding me. The isolation tactic was another part of their strategy, I realized. Make me feel alone and unsupported. I made a quick stop in the bathroom, locking myself in a stall, as tears of rage and frustration threatened to spill over. I allowed myself exactly 2 minutes to feel the full weight of the betrayal before I splashed cold water on my face and reapplied my lipstick. Looking at my reflection, I made a silent promise. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That evening, I told Daniel everything. He was furious, ready to march down to the firm and confront Richard personally. I appreciated his protective instinct, but knew a direct confrontation wouldn't solve anything. I needed to be strategic. I need to understand exactly what happened while I was away, I told him as we sat at our kitchen table after putting Emma to bed. There's more to this than they're telling me. The next day, I arrived at the office early and went straight to the storage room on the 18th floor. I needed to thoroughly examine my boxed-up belongings and files. Most attorneys would have immediately cleared out their personal items, but I had a hunch there might be valuable information mixed in with my things. I methodically sorted through each box, examining every folder and loose paper. In the third box beneath a stack of legal journals, I found a misfiled folder containing printed emails that someone had accidentally swept into my things during the hasty packing of my office. The folder was labeled Office Restructuring with Bradley's name in the corner. Inside were email exchanges between Richard Bradley and Stanley Preston, dating back to just 2 weeks after I began my maternity leave. The emails laid bare their plan with shocking clarity. Bradley has already demonstrated exceptional rapport with Angie's clients, Richard had written. The Johnson merger team specifically mentioned how impressed they are with his approach. I believe we should consider making this transition permanent rather than temporary. Stanley's response was equally disturbing. If Bradley continues to perform at this level, I agree. The corner office would certainly be appropriate for someone handling clients of that caliber. We can discuss the details of Angie's return position when the time comes. Another email from Richard sent just 1 month into my leave. Bradley has now fully taken over all of Angie's major clients. The transition has been seamless. I suggest we begin the office renovations next week to convert her space into the conference room we've been discussing. Martha will handle the HR aspects of repositioning Angie upon her return. My hands trembled as I read a direct exchange between Richard and Bradley. Bradley, what if she pushes back on the reassignments? Richard knew mothers typically have shifted priorities. Between childcare challenges and the emotional adjustment, most find they prefer a less demanding role. If she's an exception, we'll address it, but I don't anticipate significant resistance. The evidence was irrefutable. They had methodically erased my position while I was on legally protected leave banking, on the assumption that motherhood would render me too weak or distracted to fight back. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath my pain, something steely formed. I carefully photographed every incriminating email with my phone and replaced the folder exactly where I had found it. That night, I retrieved a backup external hard drive from our home safe. Before leaving for maternity leave, I had created a personal archive of all my work case notes and email exchanges related to my clients, a precaution I'd taken throughout my career. This now proved invaluable. The next day, I called Rachel Goldstein, a former classmate who specialized in employment law. We met for coffee at a cafe far from the office. "What they've done is textbook pregnancy discrimination," Rachel confirmed after reviewing the evidence I'd gathered. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act and Family Medical Leave Act both have clear provisions against exactly this kind of action. They're banking on you not knowing your rights or being too exhausted as a new mom to pursue them. "Is this something that happens often?" I asked. Rachel nodded grimly. "More than people realize. I've handled dozens of cases where women return from maternity leave to find themselves mommy-tracked, demoted, or pushed out entirely. The law is on your side, but these cases can get ugly." "I need to know if there's a pattern at Preston and Mitchell," I said. "If they've done this to other women, that strengthens my position." With Rachel's guidance, I began discreetly reaching out to former female employees who had left the firm after having children. The picture that emerged was disturbing. In the past 5 years, 7 women had either resigned or accepted demotions following maternity leave. None had fought back, fearing career repercussions or lacking the energy for a legal battle while caring for a newborn. Meanwhile, I maintained a facade of reluctant acceptance at work. I organized my cubicle, took on the minor cases assigned to me, and behaved professionally in all interactions. I noticed Richard and Martha exchanging satisfied glances when they passed my desk. They thought they had won. In reality, I was meticulously documenting everything. Every diminished assignment, every exclusion from meetings I would previously have attended, every inappropriate comment about my status as a mother. I recorded dates, times, and witnesses in a secure document I updated daily. During this period, I also made an unsettling discovery while reviewing files related to the Johnson merger. There was a financial discrepancy in how Bradley had structured certain aspects of the deal, a subtle but significant error that could cost the client millions if not corrected. It wasn't necessarily malicious, but it demonstrated his inexperience with the complex details I had mastered over years of similar cases. By the end of my second week back, I had assembled a comprehensive legal brief outlining the clear pattern of discrimination supported by documentary evidence, witness accounts from former employees, and the improperly obtained emails, revealing the premeditated nature of their actions. I also prepared a detailed analysis of the Johnson merger error, demonstrating the tangible cost of removing me from my cases. Through discreet networking, I secured a private meeting with Claire Robertson, the only female member of the firm's board. Though we had never worked together directly, I had impressed her during a charity event the previous year. She agreed to hear me out over breakfast before office hours. "I'll be honest," Angie Claire said after reviewing my evidence. "This doesn't surprise me, but seeing it documented so thoroughly is still shocking. The firm cannot afford this kind of liability legally or reputationally." "I don't want to sue," I told her honestly. "I love my work and built my career here. What I want is justice and structural change so this doesn't happen to other women." Claire studied me thoughtfully. "You're more generous than I might be in your position. Let me arrange a meeting with James Preston. As the founding partner, he needs to see this directly." 2 days later, I sat in James Preston's private office on the top floor, a space I had entered only twice before in my entire career at the firm. At 72, James was still sharp as ever, though he had stepped back from day-to-day operations. His reputation for fairness was one of the reasons I had chosen Preston and Mitchell despite offers from other firms. "Miss Clark," he said gravely after reviewing my brief, "if what you've presented is accurate, there have been serious ethical breaches here." "Every document is authentic, Mr. Preston," I assured him. "I can provide the originals of everything in that brief." He removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "I built this firm on principles of excellence and integrity. What happened during your leave represents neither." He looked at me directly. "What is it you want, Miss Clark?" The moment had arrived. Everything I had worked for, everything I had documented, had led to this crucial conversation. I straightened my shoulders and prepared to present my terms. "First, Mr. Preston, I want restoration of my professional standing." I began, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "That means returning to a comparable office, not necessarily the exact same one, and reassignment of equivalent clients and responsibilities to those I handled before my leave." James Preston nodded, making notes on a legal pad. "Continue." "Second, I want financial compensation for the professional damage done. 3 months of additional salary would be appropriate, given the deliberate nature of the demotion and the stress it has caused." "That seems reasonable," Preston acknowledged. "What else?" "Third, and most importantly, I want structural changes at the firm. A comprehensive maternity and paternity leave policy that includes guaranteed position protection, written transition plans for client coverage during leave, and a returnship program to support parents coming back to work." Preston raised an eyebrow. "That's quite extensive." "It's necessary," I countered. "What happened to me isn't unique. I've documented 7 similar cases at this firm in the past 5 years. That indicates a systematic problem, not an isolated incident." "And if we agree to these terms," Preston asked, "then I remain with the firm, and there's no legal action or public disclosure. I'm prepared to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the specific circumstances provided the policy changes are implemented." Preston was silent for a long moment, tapping his pen against the desk. "And if we were to decline?" I met his gaze directly. "Then my attorney files a pregnancy discrimination and FMLA violation lawsuit first thing tomorrow morning. The emails I've documented make our case exceptionally strong, and I'm prepared to pursue it to the fullest extent of the law." Before Preston could respond, I removed another folder from my briefcase and placed it on his desk. "There's one more thing you should see." In reviewing the Johnson merger documents, I discovered a significant error in Bradley's approach to the tax structure. This oversight could potentially cost the client an additional $4 million and expose them to regulatory scrutiny. Preston frowned and quickly reviewed the analysis I'd prepared. His expression darkened as he recognized the severity of the mistake. "This should have been caught." "It would have been if someone with appropriate experience had been handling the case," I said quietly. "I'm not sharing this to undermine Bradley specifically. He's talented, but lacks experience with mergers of this complexity. This illustrates the tangible cost of the decision to remove me from my cases." The next morning, I was called to a conference room where James Preston sat with Richard Martha from HR and the firm's general counsel. Richard looked pale while Martha maintained her professional mask despite the tension in the room. "Miss Clark has brought serious concerns to my attention," Preston began without preamble. "After reviewing her evidence and consulting with counsel, it's clear that significant errors in judgment occurred during her maternity leave." Richard started to speak, but Preston held up his hand. "The decisions regarding Miss Clark's position office and client assignments upon her return were inappropriate and potentially exposed the firm to substantial legal liability. More importantly, they violated the principles of fairness and professionalism that are supposed to be our foundation." Martha shifted uncomfortably in her seat as Preston continued. "Effective immediately, the following changes will be implemented. Miss Clark will be assigned Office 2045, which has just been vacated by Thomas Reynolds' retirement. She will resume management of the clients she handled prior to her leave, with a 2-week transition period to ensure continuity. and she will receive compensation as discussed privately. Richard's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This is unprecedented. Bradley has established relationships with these clients now. Reassigning them will be disruptive. More disruptive than a public discrimination lawsuit, Preston asked pointedly. Furthermore, Ms. Clark has identified a critical error in the Johnson merger that needs immediate attention. She'll be taking lead on correcting it given her familiarity with the case. Martha interjected, her voice tight. We were attempting to make reasonable accommodations based on what we believed would be changing priorities for a new mother. Making assumptions about an employee's commitment based on their parental status is precisely the problem, Preston replied. Going forward, all leave policies will be revised under Ms. Clark's advisement to ensure this situation is never repeated. The meeting concluded with details of my reinstatement and a timeline for policy revisions. As we stood to leave, Preston asked me to stay behind. When we were alone, he spoke more personally. I owe you an apology, Miss Clark. I've been less involved in daily operations than I should have been, and it allowed this culture to develop unchecked. Thank you, Mr. Preston, I replied. I appreciate your decisive action once you became aware. He studied me thoughtfully. You know you've demonstrated exceptional legal strategy and courage throughout this situation. Those are qualities we look for in potential partners. This may have been a setback, but I don't believe it will hinder your long-term prospects here should you choose to stay. His words confirmed what I had begun to suspect. My handling of this discrimination had paradoxically strengthened my professional standing, with the leadership that mattered most. By fighting back strategically rather than emotionally, I had demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and determination the firm valued. The next day, Bradley stopped by my new office as I was unpacking. His expression was a mixture of resentment and grudging respect. I want you to know I wasn't behind the decision to take your office, he said stiffly. I was just following Richard's direction. I understand, I replied neutrally. The Johnson merger needs attention. I'll be taking it back effective tomorrow, but I'd appreciate your notes on what's been done in my absence. He nodded curtly and turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I think what they did was wrong. I just didn't feel I was in a position to question it. We're always in a position to question what's wrong, Bradley, I responded. That's literally our job as attorneys. As he left, Jessica appeared in my doorway looking apologetic. Angie, I'm so sorry I wasn't more supportive when you first came back. Richard made it clear that anyone who made noise about the changes would face consequences. I understand, Jess, I said, gesturing for her to come in. But we shouldn't have to choose between our careers and doing what's right. That's the culture we need to change. Over the following weeks, I worked closely with HR and the board to develop comprehensive leave policies that would protect parents from experiencing what I had endured. The new protocols included written guarantees of position protection, structured transition plans, and returnship support for employees coming back from extended leave. My professional reinstatement was swift and in many ways strengthened by the incident. Clients were relieved to have me back on their cases, especially after I quietly corrected the issues with the Johnson merger before they caused any damage. The firm's attorneys, witnessing my successful stand against discrimination, began approaching me for advice on various matters, further cementing my authority. Richard maintained a cold professionalism in our interactions, while Martha, from HR, suddenly found reasons to be extraordinarily accommodating. Neither apologized directly, but their behavior reflected a new awareness that I wouldn't be easily marginalized. Through it all, I balanced my renewed career with my life as Emma's mother. It wasn't always easy, but each time I returned home to her smiling face, I knew that everything I had fought for was worth it. I was creating a better workplace not just for myself, but for her future too. 6 months after my return to Preston and Mitchell, the new parental leave policies were officially implemented. The comprehensive protocol included guaranteed position protection, structured client transition plans, and a gradual return program that allowed parents to ease back into full-time work. Most importantly, it established clear accountability measures to prevent the kind of discrimination I had experienced. The day the policies were announced, I received emails from several female associates expressing their gratitude. "Your stand has changed the culture here," one wrote. "For the first time, I feel like having children won't derail my career path." My relationship with firm leadership had evolved in unexpected ways. James Preston had taken a renewed interest in daily operations, regularly checking in to ensure the new policies were being properly implemented. He also began including me in high-level strategy meetings, seeking my perspective on various matters beyond my case assignments. Richard maintained a professional distance, though I occasionally caught him watching me with a mixture of resentment and reluctant respect. He had been quietly removed from personnel decisions, though he maintained his client responsibilities. Martha from HR had been reassigned to the firm's satellite office, replaced by a younger HR director with progressive views on work-life balance. Bradley and I established an uneasy professional relationship. After the initial tension following my reinstatement, he began occasionally seeking my guidance on complex cases. I chose to mentor rather than marginalize him, demonstrating the professional integrity that the firm had temporarily abandoned. "I misjudged you," he admitted during one late evening working session. "I thought your maternity leave was my opportunity, but I see now that cutting you out was never necessary for my own advancement." "The firm is large enough for both of us to succeed," I told him. "Advancement shouldn't come at someone else's expense, especially when that expense is discriminatory." My victory had been complete, but as weeks passed, I found myself questioning whether I wanted to remain at a firm where I'd had to fight so hard for basic fairness. The incident had changed me profoundly, opening my eyes to how vulnerable professional women became when they chose motherhood. The turning point came 3 months after the new policies were implemented, when a senior associate named Melissa approached me privately. "I'm pregnant," she confided, "but I'm terrified to tell the partners. Despite the new policies, I've overheard comments suggesting some still believe mothers can't be fully committed to their work." Her fear confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Policy changes alone couldn't transform deep-seated attitudes. Cultural change would require more than revised handbooks and formal protections. It would require new leadership and persistent advocacy. That evening, as I rocked Emma before bedtime, I made my decision. I would stay at Preston and Mitchell long enough to ensure the new policies were firmly established and to mentor women like Melissa through their leaves and returns. But eventually I would channel my experience into something more impactful. Over the following year, I established a working parents support group within the firm. We met monthly to discuss challenges, share resources, and strategize career development that accommodated family responsibilities. The group quickly became popular, with both mothers and fathers participating. I also began documenting everything I had learned about fighting workplace discrimination, organizing my notes and research into what would eventually become a framework for a broader initiative. My experience had revealed a gap that needed filling: strategic advocacy for professional parents facing discrimination. 18 months after my return from maternity leave, I submitted my resignation to James Preston. By then, I had secured the necessary financing and support to launch my own legal practice, specializing in pregnancy and family responsibility discrimination. "I can't say I'm surprised," Preston said when I handed him my notice. "But the firm will be diminished by your departure. The work we've done together has made Preston and Mitchell a better place for parents," I assured him. "My leaving isn't a rejection of those changes, but an evolution of the advocacy that began here." My new practice, Clark Family Workplace Advocates, opened in a modest office downtown. I brought with me 2 associates from Preston and Mitchell who shared my commitment to fighting discrimination, and we quickly established a reputation for effectively representing parents who had experienced workplace bias. Beyond individual cases, I developed training programs for companies wanting to proactively address discrimination issues, conducted workshops for human resource professionals, and became an expert witness in high-profile pregnancy discrimination lawsuits. Emma was nearly 3 years old when I was invited to speak at a national conference on workplace equity. Standing at the podium, I shared my story publicly for the first time. No longer bound by confidentiality. After Preston and Mitchell had been recognized for their transformed parental leave policies, Ironically, partly due to my advocacy. My office destruction became the foundation for my most important work, I told the audience. Sometimes the worst professional experiences illuminate the most crucial paths forward. The journey had been painful but transformative. The betrayal I experienced had revealed my true strength and redirected my career toward work that was both professionally fulfilling and personally meaningful. Most importantly, it had shown me that being Emma's mother hadn't diminished my professional capacity, but had instead given me new perspective and purpose. After my speech, a young attorney approached me, visibly pregnant and nervous. "I'm due in 3 months," she said. "My firm has a terrible track record with returning mothers. After hearing your story, I feel braver about standing up for myself." In that moment, I knew that every difficult step of my journey had been worthwhile. The office they destroyed had led to something far more valuable than corner views and prestige: the opportunity to create workplaces where no one would have to choose between parenthood and professional fulfillment. Today, Emma is 7, and our family has grown to include her 3-year-old brother Jacob. My practice has expanded to 3 offices across the state, with a team of attorneys dedicated to parental advocacy. I've testified before state legislators on family leave policy and contributed to the drafting of enhanced protections for working parents. The pain of that first day back from maternity leave has faded, replaced by the satisfaction of having transformed a personal injustice into a movement that benefits countless families. When Emma recently asked what I do at work, I told her I help make sure that being someone's parent doesn't mean you have to give up being good at your job. "Like you're my mom and also a lawyer?" she asked. "Exactly," I replied. "Both parts matter." Have you ever faced workplace discrimination after a major life change? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for workplace justice. Remember, your worth isn't diminished by life's transitions, and sometimes the biggest challenges reveal your greatest strengths. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it inspires you to advocate for yourself and others when facing injustice.